friends, it is a pleasure and an honor to be with you again this day, this Advent Sunday, this first Sunday in Advent, as we close out the month of blooming in preparation. So make sure that you are signed up for our newsletter and see the good work and fun that we're going to have together for our final bloom moment of the year. Because, y'all, it's almost December and I can hardly believe it. This year has gone by so quickly. But friends, I hope this past week was one that held tenderly the truth of our past, the needs of our present, and the hope for our future. As we were fed and fed others, as we gathered in person or in spirit, as we thought about all that was and is to come. I hope that in the midst of it all, you took a moment to connect with God, taking a big centering breath amidst the chaos and the loneliness and everything in between, and felt the presence of God, affirming that you are here in this world and in this life with full purpose and meaning. And if nothing else, I hope you know that breath is a prayer unto itself, and it is a holy prayer of thanks. And if this past week you didn't take that breath of fresh prayer, I invite you to take that breath with me now. And friends, we do not take these deep breaths for granted. These breaths are holy and true and sacred. And so I invite you to keep those deep breaths going as I offer us an opening word of prayer. O God of the table for us, and God of the hunger with us, O God of human longing and hope's holy creator, be with us now in this time together. Crowd us, comfort us, and call us into beloved community. Bring your eternal wisdom to new years. O God with us, O Dios con nosotros, may your words inspire my words and become our words of work, of your justice, justicia, joy, alegría, and esperanza, hope. Amen. So, I hope you noticed at the beginning of service or in this week's newsletters that I've chosen two scriptures for this week from two different Bible translations, as I just kind of walked you through. 1 Corinthians 11 comes from the words of institution, or they are the words of institution that we use for communion. And again, it's from the First Nation version of the New Testament, a translation by and for Indigenous people. And this translation, as you heard those words, I hope it was both familiar and wholly new. I love the end line that says, each time you ceremoniously eat from this fry bread and drink from this cup, you are retelling the story of his death and its full purpose and meaning. Full purpose and meaning. It's a heavy and holy weight to bear each time we gather to eat, don't you think? The good thing is that we get to do it crowded together in beloved community. And in that same vein, I chose the passage from Luke 1 about the uninvited guest who delivers some news to Mary. And it's from Dr. Will Gaffney's A Woman's Lectionary for the Whole Church, another faithful translation of the scriptures that invites us into the good news anew. This biblical translation saw the table that had been previously set, a table that we have all always been invited to, but may not have always felt welcome or seen at. And it reminds us that if our name isn't on a preset card at that table, to pull up a chair anyways. Both of these translations and these texts within them remind me of this time of year, and particularly this Sunday specifically, because today is Advent 1, the Sunday of hope. And hope is like one of those dining room tables, the kind that was created with leaves to put into it to expand. Do you know the ones? And for those that don't know, basically it's a table that sits together normally, and then you pull it apart, and it kind of bookends some wooden planks that you put in the middle to make your table longer, and so it looks like just one continuous table, and it expands in length. And when there are no leaves in it, when you take it all out and it's just the kind of two ends, it's a table. It's smaller than it could be, but it functions. It's a table. But as you sit at that table, as I sat at our table growing up, and maybe you're sitting on the side of it, not at the ends, on the side. And the plate that you're eating from, that you've sat down to have this meal together, leans just slightly to one side because there's a divot in the table right under your plate. A tiny table length indentation that runs the width of the table all the way down. And you can still see it where it's underneath the tablecloth. And that tiny hairline divot reminds you that while this table is fully functional, in fact, it's currently functioning. Like the translations of the Bibles that we have used in the past, or like the young girl with her whole life ahead of her, or like a simple meal of bread and cup. If given the opportunity, it has the capacity to do so much more. That possibility of more, that's hope. A table with a piece of bread and a cup of wine is an ordinary thing. But hope, as we do this in memory and with intention, in memory of Jesus, in memoria de Jesus, that hope turns an ordinary meal into an extraordinary relationship with God. The full purpose and meaning of Jesus' story isn't the elements or the prayers or even the scriptures. The full purpose and meaning of God's story is the people and the hope that generates when two or three are gathered. Our text this morning from 1 Corinthians, calling us to remember the full purpose and meaning of Jesus' life through shared meal, is God's way of saying to the church, when you prepare to eat, set this table with as many leaves as you have. Calling us to remember the full purpose and meaning is God saying to the curious, don't worry about an RSVP. Come and be fed. Calling us to remember the full purpose and meaning is God reminding those already settled in for the meal at the table to be ready to pick up your plates at any moment, because the table is always ready to expand. And finally, calling us to remember the full purpose and meaning of shared meal together is God saying, not only are you specifically, welcome here, but this table, this place, this community was built with you in mind before you ever even decided to join us. Hope is the carpenter that saw a small family dinner table and envisioned its possibility to host a crowded communal feast. In the First Nation version and the women's lectionary for the whole church, they too are the hope of more. Sticking with this kind of table metaphor, these translations that intentionally center and share Indigenous and womanist perspectives and languages and stories are kind of like the loaf of gluten-free bread or the grape juice instead of wine. They're made for everyone to partake because too many people were being left out and going unfed at a fully set table. So now I hope you can kind of start to see how my brain works a little bit and to see how these texts really informed both my Thanksgiving and my preparation for Advent and these coming holidays. However, while the table metaphor works for hope and serves to remind us of our call for radical hospitality, not just in these times, but in all times, I am by no means trying to erase the truth nor the lived experiences of the Indigenous people and their genocide, nor am I saying that you need to stay small or silent or be harmed or devalued in order for people to be fed. That is not at all what I am saying. Yes, there is a place at the table for everyone, but not all tables are for everyone. That's why we're called into beloved community. It takes all of us to both feed and be fed. We know this through our Saturday community lunch program that has been going for like over 30 years, friends. It takes all of us to make sure our community is fed and to feed them and to also be fed. It takes beloved community. And in that beloved community, and because of that beloved community, we must set and live into our boundaries of health and safety while also doing our part to combat systemic sins of oppression. Meaning that just because you have a place at your table does not mean you have to feed your oppressor. Your table and Christ's table are different. Your table is a piece of Christ's table. And sometimes when you are serving people at your table, maybe someone, maybe it's even some people, you've got to send them down to the other end. You got to say, you know what? I need you to move down to this other part of the table. And that's okay. In fact, that's healthy and welcome because they will be fed. Everyone is fed at Christ's table, but you do not have to do all of the feeding. Because somewhere that oppressor is being fed. Let us be clear. White supremacy, homophobia, xenophobia, sexism, racism definitely did not go hungry last week. And if the oppressor was at your table, or if they end up at your table maybe next time, then you must do your part to name, to educate, to work to dismantle that oppression. That's what it means to be part of beloved community. That is where the hope is generated, the work that comes from a shared table. Now, if you read the newsletter this past week, I realized it was a little bit of a kind of extra curriculum for us this week. But I hope you found it meaningful as I found writing it. And in fact, I even kind of went through it on my own on Thanksgiving. But if you read the newsletter this week, you would have seen a link to one of my favorite songs of these past few years. It's called Crowded Table by the Highwomen. I've mentioned here before, I'm a big Brandi Carlile fan, and she's part of that band. And this is off their debut album. And when I got that album, I played it front to back. And in the minute that Crowded Table came on, I burst into tears. I love this song because communion is my favorite part of my week. It's how I actually start my week. I don't eat anything or really drink anything until I take communion. It's It's how I start my week so that I have an intention of beloved community to go forward from. And the picture that this song paints in Crowded Table reminds me of that time, that communion, that relationship with God. And it reminds me of church, of beloved community at its best. And the whole song is beautiful. But the last verse of this song goes like this. Well, I'm not going to sing it for you, but here are the words. The door is always open. Your picture's on my wall. Everyone's a little broken, and everyone belongs. Yeah, everyone belongs. I want a house with a crowded table and a place by the fire for everyone. Let us take on the world while we're young and able, and bring us back together when the day is done. Now, the only thing I don't love about that song is a little bit of that ageism that sneaks in there. Friends, hear me now. The revolution is for everyone. The work that we are doing, taking on the world, that work is for everyone. The revolution is for everyone. But what I love about this song is not just that it's a song where everyone has room at the table, the leaves are in, but that this table is crowded, which means in my envisioning of it, it's loud and people are close and it's probably a little too hot and your elbows hit each other because you got people who are left-handed and right-handed sitting next to each other and you're just kind of on top of each other. And there's an energy to it and a spirit about it. And I love it because no one can plan that type of gathering. A crowded table means that your table has all of its leaves in it. It is as expanded as it can be. And everyone that you invited came. And then people you didn't invite probably came, or maybe they're people you didn't think that they were coming, or people said, you know, you're going to be welcome at this table, so come with me. And so all of these people show up. They feel welcome, so they stay. And you make room in any way that you can. Because it's now not just about the space, but it's that these people, they belong here and chose to be here and choose to take on the world with you and then choose to come back. That's the crowded table. As I listened to this song, as I read both of our scripture passages in preparation for this sermon this week. And I played it, I hit play and read the First Corinthians text. And I read that one first, and I imagined everyone at this crowded table on top of each other, eating, reaching over each other to grab a roll or pass the butter. There is laughter and stolen glances. There is uncertainty, and there's chosen family. And then I imagined all of them going out into the world after this meal to change it together, fed and full, with a renewed sense of calling and community. And then I listened to the song again, this time with the Luke text. And I imagined young Mary as part of that same boisterous, loud, crowded group. This young woman with her friends, just with her whole life ahead of her. After a day with her people, they all decide to come back. They've gone out. They have done the work to take on the world together and then come back together when the day is done. And so this group in my head, as this song plays, are coming back to the house, that house with the crowded table, the one that embraced her and inspired her into just action. And just before she reaches the door that everyone is flowing into, regathering around that table, she is stopped by an angel. And the angel Gabriel tells her the news of her impending pregnancy and the baby that will come. And for some reason, he has already named this baby. So she legitimately has no more choices in all of this. He's taken the fun out of it. I imagine this young woman, she is a teenager. I imagine her young mind racing, as I know mine would, with all the questions of, like, physically how, and all the anxiety that probably didn't just creep in but hit her like a tidal wave, and thinking, oh my gosh, what is she going to tell Joseph, and what will the town think, and will they believe her, and couldn't she be put to death for this, and what do you mean do not be afraid? Friends, I imagine her teenage self spiraling and just lost. And finally, as she kind of recenters herself, gathers what is being said to her, she kind of says, okay, if God says so. I don't read this text with a kind of enthusiasm that we've come to give it, because a teenage child told that they are going to carry a baby without ever knowing a man in that way, as she says. And the baby is already given a name, and the baby will do great things. So she says, okay. And then Gabriel leaves, which is a whole other issue. Just leaves her. And I imagine her standing alone on the road right outside the house with the crowded table, the house where her whole community that she has just spent a beautiful day with gathers back at that table. She stands outside, staring through the door of that open door of that house. Life-changing news. Life-changing news for her, but life-changing news for us too. There is fear and there is uncertainty. And I imagine she closes her eyes to center herself, takes that deep breath of fresh prayer. And in her mind, and in my mind, we hear the words, I want a house with a crowded table and a place by the fire for everyone. Let us take on the world while we are young and able, and bring us back together when the day is done. Mary standing in the road, the sounds of the crowded table can be heard from afar. She's not as alone as she thought. She's not as alone as she felt. And that tidal wave of anxiety is met with the smallest stream of hope. So she goes back inside the house and sits down at the table, a table that now very specifically feels more crowded than before. And she tells her story. And that already crowded table scooches in closer, leans in towards her, believing her, embracing her, filling her with hope. And then someone from that crowded table goes outside and comes back in with a plank of wood, a makeshift leaf that is rough, and the wood doesn't match the table that is there or line up evenly, but it's perfect, like her story. She is the first communion And she runs her finger down the length of the divot of that table, getting ready to welcome one more. And she recognizes the full purpose and meaning of a crowded table in God's beloved community. Amen.